year. Wonder what might interrupt next year. Thank you to all those who've contributed to the program already today. I love that thing on the screen before with all the kids doing their thing and a bit of a cappella singing and then the violins. And I recognize that music, but I can't remember the name of it. Yeah, no. Yeah, but the music, is it Pachelbel's Canon or what is it? Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Well, we don't have much time left. I was going to tell you a story, but I don't think we have nearly enough time for that. We go to past. Oh, I've got plenty of time. I will settle back. Settle back. By the way, I feel very sorry for Ken today, who hasn't had much sleep. If you happen to go to sleep back there during the sermon, Ken, I will understand. I made a quick trip to Melbourne last month. When we came back from Papua New Guinea many years ago, we requested Melbourne because my oldest daughter was at Lilydale. So they sent me to Lilydale. As soon as I got back, she left home, all of 16, fully grown up. And last month, Linda turned 50. I happened to have the Sabbath free. And her birthday was on the Sabbath, 17th of September. So I jumped in my car on Thursday night. I had to drop Lauren at Wyoming near Gosford. She works at a nursing home there. So I thought, here's my plan. I'll drop Lauren at Wyoming at 11 o'clock and I'll drive from there to Melbourne. Well, that's what I did. I did get there too without going to sleep at the wheel. I better make this a short story. So on Saturday evening was Linda's birthday, and we gathered in a vegetarian restaurant. Linda is a vegan. She's not a believer, but she's a vegan. So we had a very nice meal together. And I came home. That was a much longer story, but I made that. That's the short version. Linda was in Sydney this last week. She had to attend meetings there. When Linda was a kid growing up, my first wife and I thought she was just a naughty child. Tell her not to do something, she would do it. She was always in scrapes of all imaginable kind. And the other day she sent me a message and she said, I'm getting bored. She's the general manager of a very significant nursing home in Melbourne. She earns a large sum of money, but she's bored and she's applied for a new job. And I said to her, you sure you're not ADD? And she wrote back and she said, yeah, I probably am. And I think she is too. She gets quickly bored and she wants to move on to another challenge. So Linda will either be moving on to another challenge or they'll double her wage in where she's working. I don't know what's going to happen, but anyway. But the story I was going to tell you is about Renee. Renee is an Israeli woman. We can pick it up when she was an infant, when she was just a baby. She was born in Haifa in Israel, which is about 44 kilometers from Nazareth. You've heard of Nazareth. She had a very difficult childhood. She had some bad experiences with babysitters when she was a baby. At the age of 4, her parents divorced and put her in foster care. Her mother eventually remarried and she had problems with her mother's second husband. So by the age of 16, she was taking drugs. Her life was in a mess. She felt unloved, worthless, and her life was going nowhere. And she had developed a great distrust for adults. Think about that. As a child growing up, my parents loved me. I attended the church school. And of course, Kurumbong was just like a big Adventist ghetto. You could trust almost everybody. this girl had a great distrust for adults, especially Israeli men. Keep in mind, she herself was Israeli. Despite all of this, she grew into a very beautiful young woman and quite tall. On the outside, she looked successful. She was a glamour model. Her pictures were in the glamour magazines. She looked very successful, but on the inside, she was bleeding to death. She moved to Tel Aviv, which is 67 kilometers from Jerusalem. I had to check that out because I didn't have a clue. And she was sitting around the city one day and a woman approached her point blank and said to her, "Do you speak German?" And she said, "Well, yes." I think German might have been almost her mother tongue. So this woman hired her to work in public relations. Now, what do public relations people do? Well, her public relations would be as a tourist guide. She would be meeting Christian pilgrims at the airport. Because see, she lived in the Holy Land, and Christians from around the world every year visit Israel. Lots of Seventh-day Adventists do that. I've never done it. Not sure I ever will. But she was meeting Christian pilgrims, and that's where she first heard the name of Jesus. She'd never heard of Jesus before, because Jews growing up as children are not told anything about the story of Jesus. They keep away from it. Some of the pilgrims, of course, were very poor. And she noticed how that so many of them would speak about Jesus in very loving and devoted terms. Renee did not understand this. She had no desire to marry, and especially not to a short man. Sorry, short man. My brother's a short man. I used to be just over 6'1". I'm shrinking in my old age. But my brother was about 5'7" or 8, I think. He's a short man. One day when he met a very tall man in the street in Tel Aviv, I mean, he was seriously tall. I told you I was 6'1". This man was more than a foot taller than that. He was a professional basketball player, interestingly enough, also by the name of David. He was 2.17 meters or 7'1.5". After 3 days of meeting together and chatting together and filling in time, David asked Renee to marry him, and she agreed. In fact, they had already started using drugs together. They prepared to fly to America for the wedding and to meet his family. At the airport, David went to the counter to check in, and Renee just happened to turn around, and right behind her was another very tall man. And she went up to David, "Psst, who's that tall guy behind us?" And David turned around, "Oh, that's Tom Bender. I play basketball with him or against him." Spotting Tom Bender triggered a memory for Renee. She remembered that 10 years earlier, she had spoken to God. Now, she didn't believe in God. She was not a practicing religious Jew. She was a secular Jew. She said, "God, if you exist and if you insist I get married, he must not be Israeli. He must be very tall. He will have blue eyes, blonde hair, a cute nose, whatever that is. He must be slim, charming, and have long hair." And guess what? She just turned around and seen that guy standing right behind her. He was the answer to her prayer, the prayer that she'd prayed to the God she didn't believe in. And she fell in love with him instantly. I got a question for you, ladies. Is that possible? Can you fall in love with someone instantly? I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure you can be attracted, I'm not sure if that's love or something else. But anyway, Renee said she fell in love with him instantly. um, so Renee said to David, look, get this guy to sit on the plane with us. I want to talk to him. Noting her interest in this other tall man, David asked, have you fallen in love with this guy? Guess what she said? Yes. Yes, she said without hesitating. David ignored the answer, thinking that he was charming enough to persuade her otherwise. Well, they went to America. She met up with the family at the big get-together they had in some fancy restaurant. And when she got an opportunity to speak to everyone, this is what she said to them. She said, I'm not going to marry David. I mean, that's what they've all gathered to meet this woman coming from Israel to marry their boy. And the first thing she says to them is, I'm not going to marry him. They all thought she was joking, but she wasn't. And she cancelled the wedding. When she heard that Tom was returning to Israel, she wrote him a note because she had asked him for his address. This is what she wrote. Shalom, Tom. Don't fall in love with anyone else till I get back to Israel. Come and meet me at the airport. And she gave him her flight details. Now, she didn't know if he'd come or not. She didn't have time to wait for an answer. He was gone. So a while later, she flew back to Israel. The plane landed. No Tom. She was heartbroken. And she thought to herself, oh, well, I guess it wasn't meant to be so. It must have been a mistake. So she got into her father's car and they were about to drive off when she turned around, looked out the back window, and lo and behold, she spotted Tom. So jumping out of the car, she ran to this strange man she'd met once before, hugged him, kissed him, and said, I'll meet you here tomorrow. I'm going to Haifa now with my dad. And she gave him the name of a cafe in the city where she would meet him the next day. Then she jumped in the car with her father and drove off. When she got into the car, her father lectured her in German about getting involved with foreigners, that is, particularly non-Jews. And he said to her rather crossly, is this how I raised you? She replied, Dad, you didn't raise me at all. Remember, they dumped her in a home. This is what happens when you don't look after your daughter. She grows up wild. He'll be my husband, you see. Next day, she told Tom that she'd fallen in love with him. In fact, she said more than that. She said, I know one day we'll get married. When you're ready to marry me, let me know. Here's my number. I have to go back to work now. She's a very confident young woman. Remember, I told you she was very beautiful. She's a model, right? She could have her choice, it would seem, of man. Then she had a strange question for Tom. This question and the answer she got was the turning point in her life story. It changed her life forever.